Hey everyone, this is George Soto with Soto Ventures. Today I am with Richard Harris, who is one of the top B2B sales consultants in Silicon Valley. Today, I know you work with a ton of really cool companies all over the country, and I don't know if you're international yet, Richard, but I wanted to thank you for coming on today. How's everything going?
It's going really well, George. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. It's always fun working with you.
Absolutely. I know we've run into each other a bunch of times, at conferences over the years and got to know each other as we traveled and spoke at a couple of events recently. And you're a phenomenal person and your family's awesome. And, so that's just wanted to acknowledge you there. Yeah, no problem. Speaking of your background, how'd you kind of get into sales? What's your career background and what led you to become a consultant today?
Yeah, no, I've always been in sales. I think I had a decision to make as going through college, like many, that either I would go into business or I would go to law school, and I just didn't want to go to law school. For me, sales and law school are kind of the same thing. You both go into a fight and you hope that your knuckles are a little bloodier than your opponent, and you hope that you have fewer black eyes than your opponent. And granted, sales isn't quite that brutal anymore, but that's sort of, I think at that time, that's how I was sort of viewing it at that stage of my life. So that's where I got into it. My first real sales job was working for the Gap. And out of college, my first job, all I really wanted to do was work for the Gap because I thought it would be super cool to wear jeans and t-shirts all day. And that was my lifestyle, and that's what I wanted. So that was a little bit before what we know as the startup world existed, but that was really my first official sales gig.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Speaking of sales, you help a ton of companies with B2B sales, and everything from building pipeline and tactics and strategies and systems and playbooks. What would you say today B2B sales is all about?
Yeah, it comes down to four things, and this is really what I have built my entire business around. I think I built my even career around it before I moved into consulting, and I call it the 4 Ps, which are people, performance, planning, and process. And every one of those pieces matter very, very much to any business and technically any part of the organization, whether it's engineering or marketing or sales. But I've really gravitated towards it with sales. And depending on what stage a startup is at, or even a more existing business might be, a more mature business, those P's can rotate into priorities of importance. So that's really where I sort of have focused stuff. And I think that that's probably the biggest thing that I see people getting better at in the last 5 to 10 years is really understanding the nuances of those 4 things and applying some metrics and some science and some hypothesis and testing to improve all of them to eventually move the biggest needle, which is always revenue, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. As sales leaders, we're constantly sort of measured based off of or based on revenue and all sorts of metrics now. I was actually meeting with a venture guy recently, and he was drilling me on all these these SaaS metrics and stuff that you've been you're very close to or had to kind of calculate portions of it, but it's interesting how that's definitely evolved. Speaking of evolution, how do you see B2B selling having evolved over the past, let's say, 10 years? How has it evolved, rather?
Well, I think that there are a couple of evolutions that I've seen, right? The people who really get it understand the following, which are faster, better, and cheaper. And the startup world is always about faster. I mean, that's the existence. That's how we are disruptive in the startup space. But where most people I see fail are understanding the values between cheaper and better. There are times where you can be cheaper. There are also times where you can do better, but spend a little bit more money. And I talk to a lot of startup leaders who say that they want to fail faster to move forward quicker, but I don't actually see that happening on the sales side. On the sales side, they want to micro measure every single little thing. And that's mostly because those leaders have never actually done sales. and they are wired to understand everything. And I think that what's happening is that, without going too far off on a tangent, I'm seeing a lot more very, very smart people who have more of an engineering and a product focus, bringing things to the marketplace, but they lack it's not that they're not smart, they just lack the experience of actually having to carry the bag and sell. And for them, they are so internally wired that they have to understand that it actually slows down the sales process. And they end up, I think, hurting themselves a little bit more than they would like to. I can't say that they fail all the time. They're not always wrong. But as a sales guy who likes to move quick, it certainly is a frustration I've seen when I'm working with CEOs who might be more engineering background than sales background or business related.
What 3 tips, let's say, for example, would you provide an early stage founder or early stage sales leader in terms of what they should be focusing on during the, let's say, first year or two, maybe their seed level, Series A, early Series A?
The most important thing is to be into conversations. If you're pre-Series A, you don't need a high-flying sales guy that's going to cost you 6 figures, right? You typically need someone an SDR really, who will set the appointments for you. And in their first year, before Series A, the CEO and the owner really needs to be making those calls and having those conversations with everybody, because that's the piece they need to really understand to deliver the right messaging to market. It's a little bit challenging, I think, too, again, on the engineering side, where they're so product focused. I've worked with a lot of engineering led companies lately, and so that's where this is coming from. And I think it scares them when they can't control the outcome of the algorithm. And sales is an algorithm that you can work towards and scientifically improve, but it takes a while to do that. And I think that's a little frustrating for them. So one, I think, is making sure that you have more conversations than anything. If you're going to start hiring into sales, hire more SDRs than AEs. Don't do it upside down. Don't go and hire 2 people to set appointments and 6 people to close. That's backwards. You don't have enough of business. You won't have enough appointments. And you'll be overpaying for those AEs who are not typically great at generating their own business. If you found the AE with a Rolodex of people and it's the right fit, then I can understand that argument. So I think that's one of them. So it's conversations is the most important thing to measure. The second thing, I think, is making sure you have the right mix of SDRs to AEs. And I would probably say you probably need to hire people on the upward trajectory of their career, right? That doesn't mean you can't go find someone who has done a great job at a Google or an eBay or any of these great companies, but sometimes you need people who maybe they've been an SDR for 12 or 14 months and they're ready to go start be a closer. Give that person a shot. It'll be way more affordable. They've got a lot to prove. You can put some equity on the line for them, and they will hustle like it's nobody's business. When you go and hire someone with a pedigree, you sometimes end up finding people who are too process oriented, who they want to roll up their sleeves. They're glad to do it, but maybe they've forgotten, or they haven't had to do it in a while, or they've been managing people, and it's just not as natural to them as maybe that hustler that I like to see people hire. So I think those are probably, I mean, I can give you more tips, but those are probably the 3 since you asked for 3.
Awesome. That's some great news. That really resonates for me, just because I'm a hustler, right? And I've ran organizations, teams that have ranged from small projects that never go anywhere to teams within larger companies like for example Twitter. So for me, that really resonates, like my ability to sell as opposed to being able, and I'll be honest, I'm terrible at spreadsheets and these sorts of things, right? So I tend to lean on my team to help me right. To kind of put those things together. A quick question: what are, like, let's say, your top 2 tools that you're just kind of in love with right now?
Probably the tool. I'll probably put them in categories because there's a couple of good vendors out there. And I think it kind of depends a little bit on budget and what people can want to afford. But clearly any of the email tools that are out there, right? Whether it's ToutApp or SalesLoft, certainly for lead generation. If you need ToutApp for email, although SalesLoft has a very, very strong email component as well as a dialer. So for me, it's about email tools and dialers. So in email tools, it's Yesware, ToutApp, SalesLoft. I'm sure I think HubSpot's got something. I haven't used theirs in a while. So there's a couple of those out there that I think are really critical. So you need some level of email piece. On the phone side, you need anything that's a click to dial, right? At minimum, click to dial. But then you need to explore things like Inside Sales or Velocify. Probably one of my favorites these days is Connect and Sell. They are the guys that you buy a tool from them that will have your reps making 500 dials a day. I'm sorry, you just can't pay anybody to dial that fast. And that is a very, very powerful tool. They can get your SDRs into conversations 8 to 10 times a day, as opposed to the manual process, which is maybe 8 to 10 times a week. And you're going to succeed faster and fail faster with a tool like that. You're going to figure out your challenges a whole lot faster and be able to make adjustments to improve a whole lot quicker with 30 days of a tool like that than you would over 60 or 90 or 120 days doing it manually. So email and dialing are very, very important. And there's a lot of nuances to that. So you really do need to understand what you're trying to accomplish as an organization with your sales tools and your sales team and your messaging and where all of that fits in. And, again, it'll also come down to what your funding's like. So I appreciate, you got to look at those things. But those are the things that I think are the biggest, in my opinion.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thanks again for joining us today. I'm really excited about continuing to work with you. What would be the best way if we had a founder or early sales leader watching this video? What would be the best way to get in contact with you? You do a ton of consulting, just as a reminder.
Yeah, no, I'll mention a couple of names just so people can kind of get a sense of it. I worked with Mashry before they were purchased by Intel. I've worked with a company called Visistat out of San Jose. I've worked with Top Ops out of St. Louis and Level 11 out of Detroit. There's a couple others in the Bay Area that I've worked with. So I've done a lot of things with a lot of companies at various stages. Some are Series A or pre-Series A. Others are into Series B and Series C with hundreds of millions in funding. So for people who are wondering, gosh, can this guy help me? I've talked to a lot of people, and please just call me. I'll answer any question for anyone, anytime. George, you know that. I think I've worked with you on lots of things before. But to get in touch with me, obviously, my direct cell phone is 415-596-9149, 415-596-9149. Or you can email me, and this is the world's longest, worst email address, richard@theharrisconsultinggroup.com. Again, it's richard@theharrisconsultinggroup.com, so it may be faster to call me. And you can also reach me on Twitter at rharris415. But thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Richard. Well, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon or see you around, I'm sure, one of these days.
I will see you at some meeting or some event or some meetup somewhere soon, George. Thank you. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely. Have a great day. Enjoy the family.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.